If you have a well-tuned vulnerability management platform, it can help you measure your efforts, your auto-patching efforts.
Thank you for joining me, Andrew. I understand you're at Beyond Bank, but you've had quite an interesting career in cybersecurity. Why don't you tell me briefly a bit about your renown, your background as a cyber professional?
Sure. So I came up through the cyber consulting career starting in 2009, where I formed my own consultancy, and soon after I joined Security Assessment. That was at the time the premier penetration testing or ethical hacking consultancy in New Zealand. Great guys, all of them working there. And then from there I moved to Melbourne in 2012 and joined StratSec, and then that became BAE Systems Applied Intelligence. From there I jumped to HackLabs, and so throughout this sort of consulting arc of my career, I ended up becoming, subject matter experts in a variety of things, like how to report, ended up building out service lines for other companies.
So you were saying that you're at Beyond Bank and that cybersecurity generally falls into these two buckets. Can you explain the two buckets?
Sure. So at Beyond Bank, they had a new CEO. They brought in a new CIO, Stevie. She's great at leadership, and she recognized that cyber needed an uplift. So she called someone called Ned Farhat, and he brought in me and Rik. And I'm handling the SecOps side, trying to improve that, and he's doing the GRC side.
Yeah, all right, that's really interesting. And look, the theme of the event today is navigating the vulnerability minefield. What does that mean to you?
So for most organizations, they really need to work on the basics of vulnerabilities, right? And at Beyond Bank, they had a typical scenario, right, where they're measuring vulnerabilities out of their scanners. They're presenting these reports to the board and decisions being made. Well, what gets measured gets managed, and that's not always a good thing, especially if, like many similar sized enterprises, they've got like 9 billion under management, they haven't tuned their tools yet. Now, you're probably familiar, and the viewers are probably familiar with this scenario where you buy a piece of kit, right? You spend the money, it's installed, it's set up, and then you don't really use it, or you don't tune it right. That's the scenario I walked into. So I helped Beyond Bank navigate the vulnerability minefield through uplifting vulnerability management, specifically with the Rapid7 series of products. So Rapid7, right, they have Insight VM, that means Insight Vulnerability Management, and they have some other products as well. So Beyond Bank has a large network, all right, and it's also integrated with some of the vendors like Data Action that provide core banking services for some of these community banks. And the first thing to do was wipe out all the ranges of what was being scanned, because it was based on historical information. It hadn't been updated in a while. Subnets have changed, new branches have opened, lots of things, and blind spots have to be, eradicated. So I threw that out and did a discovery scan to find out what was really there. And in doing so, I ran into a series of problems. We've got the ghost asset problem, okay? That's when you're measuring assets that don't even exist. And this can happen when you've got network equipment that responds to maybe pings for IP addresses that are not allocated. It's not that unusual. Another problem was missing assets. Like, we knew they were there, but they weren't showing up on any of the dashboards. And that's because things like thin clients were configured such that they didn't respond to a ping. To find them, you had to seek out other ports, right? And in addition to that, we also had some other problems with scaling, right? When you've got, for example, VMs that handle a Citrix load and they're auto-scaling, that means you have like a lot of assets being measured that throws off the numbers, because they're not really separate assets at all. They're just cloned off the single image, right?
Yeah, it's scaling up.
So these are the types of challenges, technical challenges, that had to be solved in order to give accurate, actionable information reporting to the C-level or the board level. And I know it sounds easy or obvious, but I think just about maybe the big four banks are okay. But beyond that, in the next tier with the community banks, I would say that they all have the same problems.
So it's very much that you're having assets that aren't correctly mapped. There's these ghost assets that you're not necessarily aware of, and things like auto scaling throw it out. So in terms of, say, building out a framework of how to give the board the correct view of what's happening, what has to happen? Do you need to reevaluate how you have observability across multiple systems? Do you have to collate it better? Can you use AI to start to map some of these processes? What generally do you do to build that view to then give to the board?
Well, it's not just technical. It's really a people, processes, and technology problem space. And I start with the people. That's why the cyber analysts at Beyond Bank, really smart guys, we started by obtaining micro-credentials from the vendor. Okay, so that brings up the skill level for this particular task with the team that's already inside. Mm-hmm. And that worked really well. And over a number of months, we got a clearer and clearer picture of, how many vulnerabilities we truly had. And then we got to a point where we brought in the big guns. There's a woman named Beyond from a company called CyberRisk. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yvonne consults through CyberRisk. And Yvonne is probably one of the better people in the country to bring in if you need to tune a Rapid7 vulnerability management environment, because she actually used to do development for Rapid7 as well as their internal consulting. So she's been really helpful in helping us tune it so that we can get the most accurate results possible. Because even after we'd sorted out our ghost assets, our missing assets, our assets that were scaling, then we started running into other problems. Like we realized that there are limits to the actual tooling. For example, it was telling us the wrong information about how many obsolete operating systems we had. And at that time, we were still decommissioning a few Windows 2012 servers. And its ability to measure that was not great. But what's really interesting is that out of the thousands of Rapid7 customers around the world, apparently we were the first to raise it as a problem, which actually tells me, right? It tells me that we're using their reporting in a way that other people aren't.
Yeah, and I'm guessing visibility into particularly the legacy and the risk of legacy within the network or within the overall architecture is crucial because it forms a key part of the vulnerability. As cybersecurity professionals always say, it's about getting the basics right, patch, patch, patch. And knowing where some of these systems are, whether it's like Windows 2012, or I worked in a company once that had a SQL 2000 instance that wasn't well mapped. Knowing where those are is really important, right?
Exactly. If you have a well-tuned vulnerability management platform, it can help you measure your efforts, your auto-patching efforts. Let's say you're setting up some kind of automation of patching, whether it's using Entra or anything else. Your ability to measure that is important because you can show the benefit from all the work that's being done in automation of patching. You can also show what's not being improved. For example, applications like Zoom, right? They can introduce vulnerabilities into your environment and they may not be auto-updated by whatever automation platform you have for the operating systems and applications. Is kind of that edge case. And your vulnerability management scanners should pick up on that and let you measure that too.